Welcome to the Diversity Connector podcast, where we explore the rich tapestry of human experiences. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and together as we dive into conversations that bridge cultures, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate the unique perspectives each of us brings to the table. Each episode is a journey through stories and insights from a kaleidoscope of voices, each sharing their colorful narrative. Whether you're at home, on the go, or just anywhere in between, you're now part of a community that values understanding, inclusivity, and the beauty of diversity. So plug in your headphones, get comfortable, and let's connect through the power of our shared stories. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Diversity Connector podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating guest. Welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story.
Thank you, Gertrude. First off, I just love the djembe drums in that intro. I'm a djembe drummer myself. I love that sound. My name is Sobaz Benjamin. I currently live in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. And I live here with my wife and two children who are adult children now and in their 20s and mid-20s doing their thing. So my story in a nutshell, I think I'm what's called a social entrepreneur. I started a not-for-profit company the design for it started in 2007. And we rolled out our first program in 2009. And the program it's evolved into a reintegration program. So we use art as a way to problem solve, troubleshoot, and to work away at issues of what's called reintegration. So we work with formerly incarcerated people and incarcerated people. We work with marginalized people being racialized or marginalized through issues of economics, poverty, or gender or sexual orientation, and so on. But art is our main tool of choice. I am a filmmaker by training. Storytelling through film is a really important sort of core and signature form of programming for us. I was able to develop a program called the Kintsugi Monologues, and that program was informed by a number of projects that I was involved in, beginning at the Nova Scotia Youth Facility in a place out here called the Nova Scotia Youth Facility in Waterville. I did some work with the Nova Scotia Community College, two instructors, Catherine McKinnon and her colleague, to develop the Kintsugi Monologues that we offer as a core iMove program. We not only get at, I think, issues of trauma and intergenerational trauma that our apprentices contend with as they work through our programming around reintegration. But we also are we offer employment, in-house film production, and also we work to diversify our film and television industry here in the city. And we are working with a number of colleges and universities to offer people who may not have an opportunity or even the means to be able to be credentialed in the area of content creation, largely film. We are working on a micro-credentialing program, so people who come through our programming will be able to get a certificate through a tertiary institution that will enable them not only to be able to talk about their skills as it comes to film production, but also demonstrate through a certificate of completion of a program what they're capable of. So we're hoping that will open up opportunities for them in the film industry in the city as well. So that's what we do in a nutshell. I don't know, Gertrude, if that makes sense to you or if you have any questions for me in that regard.
Yes, no, that's excellent. So let's talk a little bit about your work, your journey, your origins. Let's start there.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find yourself in Canada? Can you tell us a little bit about your origins and your history?
Sure. So I was born in London, England, and my parents were from Grenada in the Caribbean. So they were part of the Windrush generation in the 50s, big wave of immigration after World War II to England. And my parents were part of that on the latter end of that journey. Yeah, I was born in England, and basically my brother, I have an older brother who moved to Canada. So when I had graduated high school and college, I decided I wanted to visit my older brother, and I visited him in Canada, and I stayed. I fell in love with Canada. That was back in the late 80s, and I lived in Toronto for a number of years, and I met my wife there, and she's from Halifax, Nova Scotia, and that's why we're here, because she's from here. And when we had our second child, we thought maybe we'll see what it is to raise our children out east. Sorry. And that's why I'm here in Nova Scotia. It's a complex place. I think Nova Scotia, unlike other parts of Canada, the Black population has been here for 300, 400 years. So they're not recent immigrants, which is so characteristic of a lot of other cities or places in Canada. They have been here before Canada was Canada. And so they're a distinct population. It's home to one of the oldest Black communities, the Prestons, North and East Preston. And I think that's my context, the context in which I do my work. And it's informed by that population. And not being a Nova Scotian myself, I've observed a lot and learned a lot, and also have been embraced by the communities here, and feel very fortunate because I'm able to do the type of work that not only I think provides others with opportunities, other African Nova Scotians with opportunities, but the learning up for me has been tremendous. The growth
Right,
for me has been tremendous. And so I'm grateful for that gift from my being here in Nova
that's
Scotia. So I've been in here
wonderful.
for permanently for about 22 years.
Okay. So, can you share the journey and the inspiration behind founding
Mhm.
iMove and how your background influenced its mission?
At the top of our conversation, I talked a little bit about the Kintsugi Monologues and this
Yes.
storytelling approach. That origins of that really are my own. I as a film student, I studied film at York University in Toronto, and I was an older student as well. And I had my son. I had a first child already, and was in my 30s and going through school there. And film I ended up taking a bit of a healing journey through my film studies, and I created a film called Weekend Warrior. And in that film, I turned the camera in on myself. That's how I think about that time, rather than projecting the camera out or focusing on others. I turned it in on myself and was able to do some work, some internal work that really led to some healing for me. It's really led to some healing for me. I had some internalized racisms. That's what we call them here in this neck of the woods. But some internalized oppression, some internalized racism, I was able to confront head on through my film work. And
Right.
so having that experience and then moving to Nova Scotia, I was approached about some years after moving here by the Justice Department.
Hmm.
And they knew of me. They knew I had done some films, and they approached me to do a film on at that time there was the inordinate number of African Nova Scotian males who were being incarcerated. And they said, could you do a film on that? And I was like, films, you can make a film and then they just collect dust on the shelf, and maybe
Yes,
one or two couple people watch it and then everybody
that's
forgets about it. So what I said, could I do something a little bit more long ranging? And they said, sure. So I spent the next 2 years from about 2007 to 2009 working with people like Pat Gorham, Yvonne Atwell, and others in the community. And I developed this program called In My Own Voice. So it started out as a project, and eventually evolved into a program, and then in 2013 it became a not-for-profit. And currently now we're a social enterprise and a production company as well. So it's gone through quite a journey these past 17 years, and we are now really on the cusp of producing feature-length documentaries with the National Film Board. We've done a
Okay.
series of films for CBC, which is the local broadcaster here, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and a number of other public companies and private organizations. So it's exciting, and it's a dream come true in a lot of ways for me and for the participants, because we're able to create content using our lives as as
Yeah.
a palette.
It's interesting. I need to introduce you to the NGO Film Festival that's coming to Melbourne actually this year. There's a Nigerian man based in Rome who's bringing this film festival to Australia, but they have a focus on all kind of social impact organizations and NGOs, and they're hosting the film festival here in October. So remind me to give you his number when we finish the interview.
I will definitely do that.
Awesome. So now let's talk a little bit more about your work. How has your organization's art-based approach facilitate in healing and self-expression amongst participants, particularly those at risk?
I think we begin with the Kintsugi Monologues. So Kintsugi is a Japanese craft philosophy also around damage, brokenness, largely through pottery. And for us, and for many too, I've seen over the years, a lot of people have been doing the same. But for me, it was interesting when I learned about Kintsugi and how that kind of translates to trauma in our human experiences. Many of us experience brokenness, and so what we work from a trauma-informed lens, with a trauma-informed lens, and we often, people who have gone through difficult things, end up, we don't see ourselves clearly. We don't have a clear understanding of our stories. There's a lot of anger, sometimes shame associated with the experiences that we may have had that are traumatic. So that's where we begin. Before we're able to tell the stories of others, we have to be able to tell our own. And we try to do, I'm not a therapist, but the work we do through the Kintsugi Monologues, I would say, is therapeutic. It offers a therapeutic opportunity to do, in narrative theory, they call it reauthoring. But there
Right.
is an opportunity, yeah, there's an opportunity to do some reauthoring, reconfiguration of the experiences that for many of us get us stuck. So it's an unsticking process, being able to see the experience in maybe a different way, in a way that you may not have considered before. And
Right.
that exercise is done in community. So it's not something that a person does by themselves. They have a cohort of peers, and they are trained to assist in this process of exploration and excavation, to be able to reconfigure an experience so that something that was maybe shame and oriented, or filled with anger, maybe if you turn it in a different direction and you look at it from a different angle, you might see something a little bit differently. So for
Yes.
example, one of our participants talked about when he was a child and he was being separated from his family, that he felt helpless. He said, as he held his brother and sister who were being taken by CPS, Child Protective Services, and there's a sense of helplessness, and he's always carried that with him. And in the group, was that a moment of weakness, or was that a moment of strength? Because the only positive source for his brothers, his siblings, was his presence there. He held
Right.
them and told them that it would be okay, and that they would be able to heal, and they would be okay. For him, that was, his family still got separated, so therefore it was a feeling of defeat.
Yeah.
But I think what the group observed and shared with him that made him reconsider that was the fact that he was a source of strength in that moment for his
Right.
brothers and his sisters. And he saw that, agreed with that, and caused a bit of a shift in something that he had carried with him for a long time, and had just a sense of inadequacy from. You know? So it's these
Hmm.
sorts of things that help us to see the stories that play again in our heads and really shape our identities. We have to be able to
Mhm.
see them differently, and others can help us do that. Because I always say, our nose is on the front of our faces,
Yeah.
but unless you have a mirror, you can't really see your nose, and
Yeah.
you need something to help you see what's right in front of you. And often that's in the Kintsugi Monologues, at least that's where we begin.
Now, you mentioned a term that not many people might be able to understand or relate to: internalized racism. Can you expand
Mm,
on that?
sure. So I think in this neck of the woods, at least anyway, black people always, whether you know them or not, we will nod and acknowledge and say, "Hey, let's go." Even if you
Mhm.
know them, and if you don't know them, and I think that's an example of, particularly a lot amongst black men, I think we do that a lot. And I've often heard people say, "What is all that about?" And I think it's about a shared experience, really. It's acknowledging a shared experience, and so no matter where you are, I think you white supremacy travels, and I think its impact is felt, or has been felt, or is felt, and thankfully it's being challenged. And we can see the I hope this is the last gasps of white supremacy we're experiencing. They always say it's darkest before the dawn, but I think that internalized oppression is simply when you begin to internalize or believe, or even the narratives that you're being sold on about
Mhm.
maybe your own inferiority, your inadequacy. For me, my dark complexion, just so many. I had stories. My mother, when I was born and growing up, would tell me a story about other family members who, when I was born, they came to the hospital and said, "Are you sure that's your son? He's so dark." Because I was darker than my mother, darker than my dad. And my mum told me that story growing up. And the story by itself is it's just a story. But then they always say a ton of feathers is still a ton. That story combined with in school, I can remember being teased. Friends who call me midnight, smile, I can't see you. And then combined with that, you've got you don't see yourself reflected in the society or in the
Yes.
culture or in the media in a positive way. And it's these little things that build up and become,
Yeah.
for me, as a teenager, it became quite overwhelming for me. And
Mm.
so that ton of feathers became a weight that caused me to internalize the oppression that was outside of me, that was in my, it had very little to do with me and more
Yeah.
to do with the environment.
You were in.
Mhm.
So, as a Black man and a social justice activist, how do you address the impacts of racism and marginalization in iMove's programming?
I think I think we address it by simply being successful. I think the best way to challenge a dysfunctional system is to be functional. The best way to
Mm.
challenge unhealthiness is to be healthy. As somebody who, in my teenage years, internalized that oppression, I think personally I developed strategies to be healthy in the face of, like I said, in the face of a lot of dysfunction. So having boundaries, self-care, love, values, and principles our mums taught us. I know for me that's very it's a very clear link and line between empathy, compassion, and love between me and my mother. She looked after children that was her job when I was growing up. She was many things, but by the time I came around,
Right.
she stayed at home and was a caregiver for children. Yeah. hmm Yeah. And I witnessed a lot of that. And I don't know if I describe myself as an activist because there's an image of activism that we often have, and it's people making the 6 o'clock news on the front lines and in marches and all these sorts of things. And that's an
Mm.
important part of struggle. It's an important part of struggle. It's not the only part of struggle. I think there's a lot of resistance going on that doesn't make the 6 o'clock news. And those people involved in that kind of resistance are every much an activist as those who are on the front lines and being maybe even arrested for what they do, and so
They
on and
do.
so forth. So it's a complex. I think activism is a complex terrain for me. Yeah, but
Mhm.
these are the sorts of things that I think we have developed in our programming that we pass on to our participants, that because the organization is very informed by my own personal journey, because that's really where the organization started.
Okay.
So these things are very much a part of programming, part of projects, the work we do, the contracts we agree to take on, the organizations we'd agree to collaborate with and partner with. These values and principles, they find their way into that. So we very
Mhm.
much take a holistic view. It's a very, like you talked about Ubuntu, this I
Yes.
am because we are. So it's this integrated, holistic approach to work and personal and professional life and home and work, and being able to figure out ways to for there to be a mutuality in our tasks, so that one isn't so fragmented and so displaced and dispersed as a person. It really is
Yes.
about having a integrated identity, which requires consolidation of so much uh, within
It's-
and without.
Yeah, and it starts inside.
Definitely,
Hmm.
definitely.
So, how do you develop programs that meet participants where they are and encourage their active engagement in self expression and leadership?
I think we've been at it for about 17 years. So our thankfully, the city communities in the city here hold us in pretty positive. They're pretty positive for what we do and how we do it. And they've had 17 years to look at the results. I'm grateful that, yeah, we have to seek out opportunities, but a lot of opportunities also come knocking at our door. So
Yes.
I'm grateful for that. Our participants will refer. They want to bring friends and family. They see the journey that they take as a healing one, one that is effective, and they want to spread that amongst their circle. So they will bring in people. And again, we have very few organizations or government bodies that we haven't worked with in the city in the 17 years that we've been around. It's been a lot. So I
Okay.
think, yeah, I think we strive to really place at the center of our programs our participants who become
Right.
apprentices and then become practitioners, and then we're grateful. I'm seeing people, the first group of people we worked with, coming back to us after they've moved on and have developed and become professionals themselves, now
Right.
coming back to the organization and wanting to reconnect, and
It's
as we work
amazing.
with new generations, of people.
So it's had a 360-degree turn. The ripple effect is already coming back now.
Definitely.
That's awesome. So, how does iMove help participants understand the systems that impact their lives and equip them to address these challenges positively?
I think a main sort of thrust of the program is to help participants or support our participants to become what they aspire to be. So what is it that you want? What is it you aspire to become? Filmmakers, doctors, lawyers,
Mm.
whatever, carpenters. What are your aspirations? And then what we try to do is to clear away the obstacles and the barriers, right?
Right.
So I think, and a lot of the people we're working with are in conflict with justice systems, economic systems, health systems, educational systems. Very, as Black people, as you will know, we were brought here to the West not to be exploited as property. That's sort of part of a big part of why the transatlantic slave trade, its mandate. So
Mm.
I think being able to really, it was, what was her name? I forget her name, but it's a documentary out now about a person who said it's not about reacting to whiteness, but it's about the thrust of blackness. And I forget her name, but very interesting comment, I thought. And so I think it's getting to really, it's about identity formation and being able to really tap into who you are, what you want, and then supporting people to be able to strive to get what it is that they desire to become. That all a whole host of other issues, systemic
Mm.
issues of conflict with systems, get addressed, because those are the things that are in the way I know for me, for example, I aspire to be one of the things I aspire to be is a cinematographer director
Right.
in the film industry.
Okay.
And there are a whole host of obstacles and barriers, both systemic as well as in that block that. So
Right.
I think it's that aspirational desire that,
Hmm.
first of all, being able to tap into that and being able to articulate what is there, and
Right.
then the journey towards it, and the removal of the obstacles and the barriers, which we support our participants in that work, that we address a whole host of systemic and other issues that get in the
Mhm.
way.
So, can you discuss the strategies that iMove employs to increase economic benefits for participants and their communities?
Mhm. So I think the money we secure from government and contracts we pay the wages of, it's a job, right? So people will receive a wage, they receive training. I
What
thought I
happened?
plugged myself. I thought I plugged myself in, and I only discovered that I didn't. So I
Ah,
got,
so power ran out.
yeah,
One
I
minute
apologize.
you were talking, the next minute you were gone. Okay. So
Apologize.
you were saying they we provide training. I think that was the last statement
Right,
I heard.
right. Yeah. So economic
Want to pick up from
opportunities for, yeah, sure.
there?
How we deal with the economics of community development and individual development. So yeah,
Yes.
we provide training and we provide jobs, and we also provide networking. So we're many of the people who have come to us as participants after a year, some after several years, are able to move
Mm-hmm.
on and become employable, or are able to secure employment in gainful employment with other organizations, whether it be the YWCA or some other theater company or a television and film company in New York. And that's the people I'm thinking of when I reflect on those places that people have moved on to after,
Yes.
spending some time with us. And I think that you uplift an individual, and again,
Mm,
you uplift a family, and you uplift a family, you uplift the community. So you do that bit by bit, and
yes.
the benefits are spread. So we
Right.
have a community council that is doing a lot of work around people from within the community who are, they have journeyed through trauma themselves and have come out on the other end, and
Mm-hmm.
they have something to offer people who are going through similar experiences. And
Yes.
so whether that be through conflict resolution, or general problem solving, being able to calm the nervous system in the face of whatever
Mm,
tensions and conflicts people may be facing, the substance use that goes along with coping in difficult situations.
yes.
This community council that is a part of our organization offers some insight to others who may be earlier on the maybe in a sort of a more, haven't journeyed as far as they may have, and therefore need to see that healing is possible, not only possible,
Yeah.
but also seeing that it's possible because people like themselves have achieved
Mm-hmm.
that. So it's one thing for me to tell
Yes.
somebody that they can overcome, but if I've never experienced what they're experiencing, then it's
That's
just
true.
words.
Yeah.
But
That's
if I'm
true.
able to, and I have no disrespect for theory, theory is important too, but I think equally as
Mm,
powerful is seeing somebody like yourself who comes from the same community or similar community, has experienced similar challenges and obstacles, and they're able to share the strategies of overcoming. That's a very powerful, I think, testimony, and a very powerful engine for change. That experiential piece.
so, how has iMove developed as a social enterprise? What was the reason for you transitioning from an NGO to a social enterprise? And what are your goals for its sustainability?
Yeah, I think we started out as a redirection program, and I think we're still an NGO. I don't think that being a social enterprise excludes us from being a non-government, a not-for-profit as well.
Right.
But what has changed, I think, is because I think the work of reintegration is social work. That's a work that's going to benefit the society, because often in our current system, I think I always say we're stuck in a pain and punishment cycle. So we're hurt by people who cause harm, and then we want to punish by locking them up and out of sight, out of mind. But then those people
Yeah.
do return to our communities and they become our neighbors again, right? And that's why it's a
Yeah.
bit of just a cycle. So I think you can't
Okay.
you do have to break that cycle somewhere, and that somewhere has to be, we see it being broken through some sort of healing for those who cause harm,
Mm.
and those who are harmed. And so I think that we became a social enterprise largely because we discovered that it's not only film production, but it's also music production. We are producing a cultural product. The internet, I think, has a lot to do. The information age has a lot to do with the ability to market oneself now, and one's product also. But I think art therapeutically, I think it's a very short hop, skip, and a jump away from using art therapeutically, and also then being able to produce art or content in for the industry. And I think
Okay.
the industry requires sort of innovation. There's this saying that every story has already been told. That might be true, but it's perspective that makes stories interesting and unique. And I think the perspective from which we are telling our stories is not a common one. And therefore, the content that gets produced from that location is, again, there's something uncommon about it, and therefore, I think, valuable to the market. So I think
Mm.
becoming a social enterprise, I think, is a logical evolution. It's been a very organic move. It's not something that we've artificially created. It's not something we've struggled to create, in the sense of, it's always difficult to find funding and resources to support, but the work itself has followed a natural trajectory to where we are currently.
Okay. So, how have the awards and recognitions that you've received influenced iMove's direction and visibility?
I think, like I said, I think I feel very fortunate that I feel embraced here in Halifax. And maybe when I moved here 20 plus years ago, I was naive, and I remember a person telling me, "Oh, this person is very impressed with what you do, and we welcome you into the community," and this sorts of thing. And I didn't think at the time that's what I expected. I came to here, I came here expecting to be
Mhm.
embraced, because
Yes.
that's the home in which I came from. I did not come from a home where, I always say, my mother told me I could fly, and I believed her. And so
Yes.
I think that in a lot of ways, I'm a Pan-Africanist in a lot of ways. We are one people. I love Black people, and of course, when I'm expecting that love to be returned, and it has been.
Come
But there are times when
Yes.
there are times, sometimes it's not a guarantee, and I've learned that as I've aged and grown older, that it's not.
Yes.
We say here in this neck of the woods, not every skin folk is kinfolk, and also
Um,
you're doing battle with white supremacy. So I think that
yeah.
I think
It's a
whatever
challenge
recognition that I've
itself.
received, yeah, no, totally. And I think being healthy in the face of that, being able to pursue one's dreams in the face of that, I've been fortunate. I see myself as a storyteller. I see myself as a filmmaker, and I'm on that journey and on that path, and I want to be able to offer that to others. And I've been able to do that. So I feel very fortunate, very blessed,
That's
and it fuels the work, because this is work that is, we say here in this neck of the woods, is feast and famine. The film industry, even
yeah.
without sort of government interventions and so on, is feast and famine. There are times when it's great and it's coming in, and there are times where it's just nothing. And I
It
think
dries
if you don't
up.
have,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. If you don't have you quickly discover, like, why you're doing what it is that you're doing, and if that why doesn't sustain the what, then it's going to be difficult. But my why has always sustained the what, and it's my wife and children, we've been able to provide a life for them that they're benefiting from. I'm grateful for that. And I've had the support of my wife throughout all of this. We've been married for 30 plus years, and we're still together, and we're still working away at things, and we believe in each
Amazing.
other. So, yeah.
Yeah. So what is your vision? This is my last question.
Okay.
What is your vision for iMove's future and the
Mm.
long-term impact you hope to achieve for its participants and their communities?
The impact for the communities and the individuals is becoming what they aspire to be. I
Mm.
think we can do that through stories, and in fact, that's what we do. We tell stories in order to make sense of the world and our place in it. And I think that
Yes.
the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves, our identities, and that becoming, that is what I want to support that work for our participants and for community.
Right.
We work in a community called Uniac Square here in Halifax, and
Mm.
snapshot of a history. The Uniac Square is a public housing that was created for displaced African Nova Scotian people from a place called Africville that was bulldozed in
Okay.
the 1960s in the name of urban renewal. And there are a number of housing complexes that were created where that displaced population was then relocated to. And we're located like in Uniac Square, one of them. And I think it's a community that it's a beautiful community, but heavily stigmatized, as most
Right.
public housing is. However, there is a lot to celebrate and a lot of triumph, and we want to be able to tell a complete picture of that community and the other there's many communities that we work with. And I think the individual, the private is the public. So the individual, I think, is, if they're in a healthy place and they're in a place where they're thriving, they're giving
Yes.
back. We encourage people to be able to reach back and support
Do
people.
something.
Yeah, and I
Awesome.
think for the organization too, I hope iMove will live on beyond me. So I'm trying to put in place now, identifying somebody else, getting a lot of the stuff that's in my head
Exactly.
out and
Out.
shared
Yeah.
with others, and so that the work can continue. And mentorship is hugely important.
Okay.
Being able to identify, passing the torch on, as people have said, and figuring out how to do that to the next
Mm-hmm.
generation and so on. This is how we live and how things live and stay alive. So on that of figuring out, like, how does iMove survive when I'm not around?
Wow. Listen, thank you so much for coming online and sharing your story with us today. Lots of insights, lots of things we've learned, that when we tell these stories from different perspectives, we are shining a light on the condition of being Black in this world. A lot of people have no idea what that experience is like. So I really thank you for the work you're doing, especially in supporting young Black men. We're finding the same situation here in Australia. The prison system is full of brown bodies. It's young African youth, Aboriginal youth, and it's something that we all have to work on. So I would love to connect with you on that level at some point this year. So thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. The Diversity Connector is bringing you stories from people from all over the world, celebrating our diversity, sharing our stories to create a bridge of understanding of what it is to be different. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. Thanks again, brother. And that's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant and global conversation. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you've heard today is a thread in the larger fabric of our shared humanity. So, as you step back into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Do follow us on social media by looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep listening, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast signing off. Stay curious, stay open, and definitely